Spring is here, but will Europe's central banks spring into action next week? Well, Sarah and Nina are here to discuss that. And Sarah, I guess the main event next week is going to be the ECB's latest rate decision, right?
Definitely, and I think the ECB meetings are always a bit exciting, and they've been really exciting lately. There's been so much pressure on the policymakers to do something to fight mainly low inflation, but also the strong euro. But for the meeting next week, it seems like Draghi and co will keep their powder dry, and then maybe push off any policy decisions until later this year.
Because what happened to inflation most recently?
Well, April inflation picked up to 0.7%, which was a bit weaker than expected, but given the German inflation data was also a bit weaker than expected, it was sort of like in the ballpark of what people were thinking this could happen. So it was sort of a number that put Draghi basically between a rock and a hard place, because it wasn't really weak enough to immediately trigger any action, but at the same time it wasn't really strong enough to say we're completely out of the woods yet and we don't have to worry about low inflation anymore.
But talking about the strong euro, it is strong still, but it hasn't actually had any significant moves since the last meeting. So again, maybe taking the pressure off action in that respect. And we do have the June meeting as well, where there'll be updated staff projections. So maybe action more likely in June, perhaps.
Okay. The Bank of England sat on its hands for most of the last couple of years, basically.
Yes.
They've got another meeting next week. Any change there?
Well, this one's maybe slightly a bit more interesting because the unemployment rate has fallen below 7%. So that's sort of, that did put the cat among the pigeons slightly. So maybe a bit of a more interesting meeting in that respect. But whether we see any policymakers actually voting for a rate rise is maybe a little bit too soon to call. It's more likely later in the year that we'll see a split vote on that. You know, inflation's still below target. Sterling's very strong, so it doesn't really seem like the right time to be doing that at the moment.
Okay.
No, and as where Draghi is sort of in a position where he doesn't exactly necessarily know what to do, the Bank of England is sort of in a Goldilocks scenario where the growth is strong, but it's not too strong, so they can sort of just keep riding this wave for maybe a bit longer.
Okay, so lots of meetings, much data next week. I think we've got industrial production, is that right?
Yeah, and that's actually really the only data that's sort of the headliners. Industrial production.
From Germany, France and the UK.
Yeah.
And German industrial production is expected to tick up, but sort of industrial orders have looked for maybe like a weaker second quarter in play.
Okay, across the pond, a bit more central bank action there as well, with Janet Yellen speaking, is that right?
Yeah, she is testifying to the Joint Economic Committee of Congress. It's such a long name, I have to look at it. But we shouldn't really expect any surprises here. She probably won't deviate much from the April FOMC statement, so she's probably going to take the dovish line again. And I think what people are looking for, just any hints on future Fed policy, but as usual, really.
And another opportunity to distance herself from that comment she made about rates rising 6 months at the once QE's finished. Yeah,
she made a bit of a slip last time out, didn't she? So, you know, we'll be watching that closely. Okay, on the corporate front, earnings season is in full swing in Europe now. What's the highlights next week, Nina?
It's a very busy week. We've got UBS, SocGen, Siemens as well, which is particularly interesting given current developments with Alstom and Rolls-Royce. But what may be in focus is actually Barclays.
Right.
We've had a raft of earnings from UK banks, and Barclays have their IMS next week. But what's actually going to be more interesting is probably the strategy update at the end of the week. And there's been a lot of chatter, a lot of speculation in the run-up to this meeting, this strategy update, with a lot of focus on the investment banking arm. Now, Barclays' statement of intent in reshaping the business has been well received, and we'll be looking for further details of that next week.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. Thanks very much, both of you.